Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gretchen and today I am here to finally kick off my Uncovering Indies book series. Earlier this year I made a video talking about how I wanted to start doing a series where I highlighted specific independent presses. And at the time, the reason that it was on my mind was because it had just been the end of the year and I was looking at my personal best of list of books for 2024, and I realized that a large chunk of them were all from independent presses. So I selfishly wanted to use this video series as an excuse to find more great books from these presses, backlists, and then also maybe explore some independent presses that I have never read from before. But things have changed, and although I still want to do the project for those reasons, there are more reasons than ever for me to want to put a series like this out there. You might already be aware that the publishing industry in the United States is dominated by 5 major publishers. They're referred to as the Big Five, and they include Penguin Random House, Hachette Book Group, Macmillan, Simon & Schuster, and Harper Collins. Now, I bring these publishers up because they have the means and the manpower to promote their authors and market their titles and produce and distribute their books in mass quantities. So there is a very good reason why we hear about a lot of their books and why they end up on our radar. And I do want to be clear about mentioning, or my purpose for mentioning, these Big Five publishers. It's not to bash them in any way. I read from all of them. Some of my favorite authors are clients of theirs, and they produce a lot of amazing literature. I mention them to point out that they have the means to get their titles into the hands of readers, whereas we have that as being a really big challenge for a lot of the smaller indie presses. They are often very small operations with limited staff, super tight budgets, and they don't have the ability to promote their books as much, or for marketing, or even to compensate their authors. And they really depend on word of mouth from readers and people like me that have a small but mighty little following on BookTube. And hopefully I can help get some of these books into the hands of readers as well. Another reason why I'm championing these smaller presses is that a lot of them depend on public funding and grants in order to keep their operations afloat. You may be aware that back in May, there was a list of independent publishers here in the States that lost all of their funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. They lost all of their grants. And at this time, because of that, some of their operations are at risk and they need our support more than ever. If you're interested in learning more about this, the lovely Sarah, she's one of my favorite booktubers over at Eyes on Indie, did a fantastic video on this, and I will definitely link that in this description. She is absolutely incredible, and I admire her so much because she too is a champion for indie presses, and she does so much work on her channel to promote them. And she also, on a side note, has the best recommendations. If you don't follow her, you absolutely should. So now that you know the reasoning behind why I am doing this, I will quickly tell you what to expect from each of these videos. So the way that I will try to set them up is I'll give you a little bit of a history of each of the presses, talk about their mission statements and the types of books that they they like to release, if I can find that information, and then also highlight some of their backlisted titles. And then for each video, I will review some of their books that I have read. So I would like to kind of plan on maybe reading at least 2 or 3 from each of them whenever I go to put a video together, so that you get a little bit of a flavor of what each of these presses has to offer. And then I will also try to include some of their upcoming titles as well, to get some of them on your radar. And so with that being said, let's get into our first indie press, which is Black Cat. So your first question might be, why choose Black Cat? And the answer is very simple. It was literally the first indie book publisher that I read from this year. There is no particular reason other than that, but I'm glad I started with this one because this press turns out to be very interesting, and it has a pretty unique history, which we'll get into now. So Black Cat is an imprint of a larger independent publisher here in the States called Grove Atlantic. Now, Black Cat started back in 1961, and at the time it focused on making cheap mass market paperbacks in order to make the modern literature of that time more accessible to readers. Authors that they published at the time include William S. Burroughs, Jack Kerouac, and Henry Miller. And if you actually, I'm going to put a little picture here of some of those covers, and if you are looking at that picture, you'll see even the label on the book was letting people know what their purpose was, you know, to make more affordable books and get these stories out there, and that really cracks me up. You can also see that they had the same logo then as they do now, so nothing has changed with that. Now, Black Cat from 1961 remained in operation until 1984, when the imprint was retired. And then thankfully in 2004, it was relaunched, and instead of focusing on mass market fiction, they shifted their focus to trade paperbacks of both fiction and nonfiction and translated fiction. Since their relaunch, they've published over 150 titles, and in the past it looks like they release anywhere between like 3 to 5 new books a year. So even though it's an indie press, it's definitely one of the bigger ones, and they put out a lot more literature. Although I will say, in doing my research for this video, it looks like they kind of took a bit of a hiatus in 2025 as far as releases go, but there is going to be some new books from this press starting in 2026, and we'll talk about that a little later. So now that we know a little bit about their history, let's talk about some of the titles that they have released over the years. You may be familiar with some of these, and as I was going through the list of the ones that they have published, I tried to pick out some of those ones that you may be more familiar with, so that you can maybe get a feel for the press in case you have read any of these. The first one is Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. We also had Annabelle by Kathleen Winter. If you're familiar with the Icelandic author Auda Eva Olafsdóttir, I think that's how she pronounces her name. I'm sure I butchered it, but she publishes, or all of her books are published under Black Cat in the States. So we have titles like Miss Iceland, Hotel Silence, Animal Life, and then also some of the short story collections by Claire Keegan have also been published under Black Cat in the States. It is also a press that has had a lot of critical acclaim. It has published several books that have been honored with award nominations, including the Stella Prize, the Republic of Consciousness of the US and Canada version. We have the Giller Prize, the Women's Prize for Fiction, but back when it was called the Orange Prize, and it has had several Booker longlisted and shortlisted titles over the years for both the Booker and the International Booker. We have In Ascension by Martin McInnes. That was a longlisted title for the Booker back in 2023. We have Pyre by Perumal Morrigan. This was, I think, longlisted for the International Booker back in 2023. We have another more recent book, Lost on Me by Veronica Ramo. This was an International Booker longlisted title for 2024, and there have been 2 winners of the Booker Prize from this press, and I'm going to be reviewing both of those books today. We have The Gathering by Anne Enright, and we have Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo, and this shared the Booker with Margaret Atwood in 2019. One thing I do want to mention before I get into my official reviews is that I want to point out that my copies for these 2 books, The Gathering and Girl, Woman, Other, and possibly even some of these other ones, they are published by Black Cat, and hopefully you can see the little symbol there, or the logo, but you might see these in the wild under one of the other imprints for Grove Atlantic. Sometimes publishers with imprints or multiple imprints under them often release their titles under other imprints that they might own, or you may even see different ones between the hardcover and the paperback. In fact, Grove Atlantic is actually re-releasing a version or a new updated cover of The Gathering this year under Grove Atlantic. So you'll see that, I think, in just a few weeks. I'm filming this in August, at the beginning of August, so we should see that soon. And then the hardcover of Girl, Woman, Other was published under Grove Atlantic, and the paperback version of it was published under Black Cat. Don't ask me why they do that, but I wanted to clarify in case you do run into a copy of these books and you think that I'm crazy because it might not show that they're from Black Cat, but my editions were published by them. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the book reviews. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is The Gathering by Anne Enright. And I will be perfectly honest and say that I was not a huge fan of the first book that I read by this author. I read The Wren, and I was not impressed with it, and I was a little nervous going into this, but I am the type of reader that will give any author a second chance or even a third chance, because I have favorite authors that sometimes fall flat for me, and it might not be the author, it might just be the particular book that I pick up that I don't get along with. So I never like to kind of be that one and done type of reader. I will give multiple chances because I need to be fair and have things to compare in order to completely dismiss an author. But I'm glad that I did, because I got along much better with this book than I did with her first one. Now, I read this book back in January, and even though that was a while ago, this is a book that has stayed with me. It has sort of a lingering, haunting effect to it, and I find myself periodically being drawn into the story again. I'll watch a movie, or I will hear a song, or I will read a book that conjures up some of the same feelings and emotions that I felt as I was reading this book. And I think that that's the hallmark of a really talented author, when they're still able to make you stay with those characters and you distinctly remember that feeling so much that you had while you were reading the book. And this is definitely one of those reading experiences that has done that for me. So that was a part of why I I think I'm still impressed with this book. So this book starts in a very intriguing way for me. It's our main character, or our narrator, Veronica, and she's telling us as a reader that she is basically going to relay an event or a crime that she witnessed when she was 8 or 9 years old at her grandmother's house. And she is very clear that she may be an unreliable narrator. She is clear that what she perceived as a child may not actually be reality, but she also is clear to let us know that she feels that the events that she witnessed are the root cause of her brother Liam's death. Now, when the story begins, all of the family is gathering together. All of the living siblings are gathering together for the wake of Liam, who has died due to a drowning. And Liam lived a very troubled and tortured life, and throughout the book, Veronica is reflecting on all of the reasons why she feels he died and what events could have led to his depression and all of the things that made his life the tragedy that it was. And it all revolves around what she witnessed as a kid. And we eventually get the story of that, but we also learn not only about how it impacted Liam, but how Veronica's harboring of that secret of her brothers and herself, of what she witnessed over the years, has impacted her life, and how it has impacted her relationships with her parents, her other siblings, and even her own husband and children. And it was just such an interesting read, and it was bleak and it was depressing, but it was also one of those books that, even though it had difficult subject matter, it had little pockets of dark humor which caught me off guard, which made this book not only a great read but also helped keep it entertaining. As far as subject matter goes, this was not an easy read by any means, and I will be honest, it did make me very uncomfortable at times. I don't want to spoil anything, but it did have some graphic moments, so if you're a reader that is cautious about trigger warnings, I would go ahead and look into what those were. I don't want to say them here because it might be a spoiler for somebody that does want to read that doesn't, so I'll leave that up to you to look into. But for all of that, even though it made me uncomfortable at times, I really did appreciate the way that Enright executed the story, and I also liked that it was told through the perspective of a grieving sister. I really liked that angle, and that we not only got to learn about what her brother was going through, but also how those tragedies that happen to those people that we love in our lives can impact our relationships between them, but how it bleeds over into those relationships that we have with other people. This book is a fantastic example of how showing love and support for the people in our lives that we care about may not be enough to help them cope with their own personal traumas, and sometimes they need to find outside sources in order to help them get through things. I also really loved Enright's prose in this book. The beauty of her writing really helped to neutralize all of the ugliness that was happening to these characters, and it definitely helped make the story more digestible. The only thing that was a little bit of a negative for me, aside from some of the scenes being emotionally tough to read, was the pacing. I was immediately drawn into the story and thought it would be a really fast read, but it slowed down significantly for me at about a quarter of the way through. Enright really seemed to take her time to unfold the whole mystery of what happened to Liam at his grandmother's, and I was getting a little frustrated, if I'm honest, but that was probably just a me thing. I can get very impatient reading books that have a mystery element because I just want to know what happened. So I wouldn't necessarily let that, or convince you not to read the book because of that. I do really struggle with that in my own personal reading. But if you are a reader that does kind of get a little impatient in books that have a mystery element where the author does seem to drag it out a little bit, you might have the same frustration with this book. But all in all, I think Enright has redeemed herself, and I can definitely see why this ended up winning the Booker, and I'm really glad I gave this author a second chance. Moving on to Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo. And I honestly have no excuse for why I am just getting to this book in 2025. I'm guessing that a lot of you have already read this book, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but I still wanted to talk about it because there might be readers out there that are in the same boat and want to pick it up or have wanted to for years and just haven't found the time. I thought that this book was fantastic, and I think that it's a great representation of the quality of literature that you can expect from this publisher. Now, this book was unique in a couple senses. First of all, the way that it was structured and laid out. This book is a novel, but it's laid out in sections related to specific characters. And the characters are actually grouped together in threes. So we have one chapter or one part that has a chapter for each character, but those three characters are somehow linked and they are somehow related to each other, and their stories start to overlap. And then by the end of the book, you have this culmination of all of the characters coming together, overlapping, and their narratives are intertwining. And the way that Evaristo executed this, I don't know how she did it. I got to the end and I kind of figured that that was what was going to happen because there was so much overlap and little glimpses into the cross lives of these characters, that it would somehow come together at the end. But I didn't expect how it actually did come together, and it was absolutely brilliant. The 12 characters, it's very important to mention that they are all Black British women, and they represent a wide range of backgrounds, ages, professions, social classes, sexual orientations, religions, identities, and we follow each of them through their normal lives. This book covers all of the good bits of their lives, and it covers all of the bad bits too. And we see happy, healthy relationships, we see toxic ones, we see women fighting the patriarchy and trying to make sure that their voices are heard and making sure that they're treated as equals. And then we have daughters struggling with understanding their mothers, and mothers struggling to connect with their daughters. And this book was just jam-packed with their life experiences, and it was absolutely fascinating. I loved every minute of this book, but what really made this book incredible to me was that it was from a perspective, or a group of perspectives, that I have never read from before. As I mentioned, these were all Black British women, and I was able to read from these perspectives, and I was able to learn and hear about what life is like from them, and how different it is from my own life, but also the similarities that are there, the glaring differences that are there, and to see how, even though we're all women, how the world reacts and treats us differently, and how some women are going to have challenges, but there are other women that are going to have even more challenges to get through just because of the color of their skin or the walk of life that they have. And Evaristo not only managed to do this with her characters, but she did it with heart and humor and intelligence. And not only that, but she made it incredibly entertaining and readable, and it was so good. It was so good. I can absolutely understand all of the hype for this book, and if things stay the way they are, I have a feeling that this book is going to make one of my best books of the year. All right, and the last book that I read for this video is called ThePossessed by Witold Gombrowicz. This is translated from the Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. Now, this book has a very interesting backstory that I want to get into before I tell you what the book is actually about. So this book was originally released in Poland in serialized form. It was printed in a daily newspaper during the lead up to the start of World War II, and then publication was halted once Poland was invaded early September of 1939. It was also written under a pseudonym. Gombrowicz was an established author, and he considered this specific book a piece of pulp. He stated that he strictly read it just to make money, and he really didn't want to have his name associated with it because he felt he was doing much more important things with his other literature, and he didn't necessarily want a book like this to taint his reputation. Another interesting part of his life story is that he dodged some bullets throughout his life. In late July of 1939, he was invited to travel to Buenos Aires on a diplomatic trip, and he was there while the lead up and invasion of Poland occurred, and he decided to remain in Buenos Aires, and that is where he stayed until 1963. So he was able to be and remove himself away from all of the chaos of war, but he still had family there, and he made that very tough decision to stay. So I thought that that was very interesting as well. So let's talk about what this book is about. So we have our main character. His name is Marion. He is a down on his luck tennis coach, and he is hired to help coach this up and coming young tennis player named Maya. Maya comes from a wealthy family, and her family invites Marion to their Polish countryside estate in order to meet Maya and help start to train and coach her. So once he gets there and he meets Maya, they kind of get off to a little bit of a strange start. They don't seem to get along. They're very argumentative toward each other, but they're also very drawn to each other at the same time. The chemistry is there. Maya is engaged to another man, and this complicates things, but then there's also this mystery surrounding this old rundown castle that's close to this estate, and it's supposedly haunted. The castle is also rumored to house a whole bunch of priceless art in it, and there are some folks that are at the estate that are trying to take advantage of the current resident of the castle in order to get their hands on that art so that they can profit from it. Now, because this is a bit of a mystery, there are definitely secrets that are revealed throughout this book that I don't want to give as far as the plot goes, so I won't talk any more about what the plot is, but overall I had a good time with this book. It did have a lot of unique elements, and I was entertained throughout the story. It had a lot of really interesting quirks to it. For example, our main character, I mentioned his name is Marion. Marion had to change his name, or his last name, I should say, changed partway throughout the book. He started out as Walchuk, but then it was later changed to a different name. And remember that I said that this book was serialized? Well, after the first installments of this story were released, Gombrowicz claimed that there was a real tennis coach that had the last name of Walchuk, and he was forced to change it because he did didn't want to get into any legal trouble with that tennis coach, and he didn't want to be charged with libel. So I thought that that was really funny and interesting. This book also very much gave me Clue or Cluedo vibes, you know, the board game, mainly because of the characters. We had this large cast of all of these eccentric characters. There was a mystery to be solved, and they all seemed to have ulterior motives, and everyone was unlikable, and they all seemed guilty of something, but it was super fun. I will say though that this book started off very strong for me, and most of the chapters had really great cliffhangers, as one would probably expect from something that was serialized, because you wanted to get the attention of the reader to get them to come back and read the next part. But the ending did fall a little flat for me. I really did enjoy my time with it overall, but I was hoping to get a little more excitement out of the ending. But yeah, all in all, I think that it was a pretty enjoyable read. So now that I talked about the books that I read and reviewed those, I also want to end these videos with some new releases that you can expect from these presses or these publishers. Now, I mentioned earlier that it looks like this particular press took a break from publishing anything in 2025, but I do see that they have a January 2026 release on deck, and I'm super excited about it, especially because this is a book that I started to see buzz about whenever people were releasing their predictions videos for this year's Booker Prize. I saw this book end up on a few people's predictions list, and I'm really excited about it. And that book is Call Me Ishmael by Xiaolu Hua, and this is a feminist retelling of Moby Dick, which is for sure going directly on my TBR. That sounds like it's going to be fantastic. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about Black Cat. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know sometimes these videos where you're covering a lot can be a little on the long side, but I hope that I've convinced you to give this press a chance if you haven't already. I have really enjoyed my time spent with their books, and I cannot wait to see what future releases we get from them. I would also love to hear if you have read anything by this publisher that I haven't talked about, or if there are any that you're thinking of picking up. Also, I want to mention that the next video I think I will do in this series will likely be for Tin House. I've already read 3 books from them this year, and I think one of them is going to make my top books of the year as well. So I am really excited to put that video together. And I also want to say that I am actively doing reading for a video for Open Letter Books and Two Lines Press. Those 2 publishers specifically were ones that were affected or had their funding affected by losing their NEA grants, and I want to make sure that I get those videos out sooner or later so that we can maybe get them a little bit more support. So thanks again for all your support for my channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, or subscribe, and we will see you for the next one, and until we read again, bye!